Good deal. Folks, if I could have your attention, I'd like to call the Planning Commission meeting to order this morning on December 19th. I'd just like to welcome everyone and wish everyone a Merry Christmas. And as we get started here this morning, we've got one docketed item today, so hopefully we won't be all day or whatever, because by 2 o'clock we have to be out of here because fiscal court meets today because of the holidays. So anyway, just wanted to, I'm Kevin Jeffries, Chairman of the Planning Commission. And if you would, folks that are here, let's join me for Pledge of Allegiance, please.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, thank you. And folks that are here, if you have a cell phone with you, please turn it off or turn it on vibrate so that it doesn't interfere with the cameras here in the courtroom. Ms. Fox, if you would, let's go ahead and get staff sworn in this morning.
Do you solemnly swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
All right, Commissioners, you should have in your packet the minutes from our meeting on November 28th. If you could, we'd like to get a motion on the floor to approve those, and then once we get a second, then we can discuss them. So we have a motion to approve. Okay. Mr. Douglas moves that we approve them. Do I have a second? Okay, Mr. Mesker seconds. Any discussion, any additions or corrections to the minutes as mailed? Mr. Finney, is your mic on?
Oh, thank you. On page 13 of 17, under other business, Pee Wee Valley Yule Log Celebration says they will have a bonfire, and I don't believe that is correct.
No, okay.
Just curious.
Okay,
We're burning, yeah. All the paperwork gets burnt. Yep.
okay, we will take care of that.
Thanks.
Anything else? Okay. Any other additions or corrections to the minutes? Okay, seeing none, now we'll do a voice vote on this. All those approving the minutes from our November 28th meeting with that one correction signify by saying aye. All opposed, no. Okay, the minutes from the November 28th meeting have been approved. All right, and with that, we'll move right on into our public hearing. And I'll ask Ms. Fox, if you'll go ahead and read the docketed item, please.
Docket PZ 17-031, application has been filed by Jericho Partners for the approval of a revised preliminary subdivision plan on 103.4 acres known as Summit Parks, Section 2. The property is located at 2935 Jericho Road, LaGrange. The current zoning is CO1 Conservation.
The square.
And an R2 residential district.
No, no.
Oh, okay. Okay.
All right.
Okay. All right, thank you, Ms. And Ms. Alvey will introduce the docket for the commissioners.
Good morning, Amy Alvey with Oldham County Planning and Development Services. As Ms. Fox stated, this is a revised preliminary subdivision plan for Summit Park Section 2 by Jericho Partners. The property is zoned R2 residential and CO1 conservation. The total site size is 158.3 acres. Section 2 is 103.4. This is the total site here outlined in red to give you an aerial view of what is there. This is just an area view. You'll see everything that is highlighted here that has been platted as part of Section 1 of Summit Parks. This is just another view. This is the zoning. Everything there in the light yellow is zoned R2, and then the green areas here is CO1 conservation. Site history: on September 26th of 2006, the Oldham County Planning Commission approved a preliminary subdivision plan for 192 lots on approximately 158 acres to be known as Jericho Point. It was later renamed to Summit Parks. That was docket PZ 06026. The as I just stated, the previous plan was approved for 192 lots. The revised plan is for 228 single-family lots utilizing the same two entrances off of Jericho Road. This is the 2006 approved plan of the 192 single-family lots, and you'll see highlighted here in red, that is the signature entrance, and then this is the second entrance along Jericho Road. In January of 2008, a record plat was recorded for sections 1A and 1B of Summit Parks, which included 58 lots and 4.6 acres of open space, leaving a balance of 134 lots and 9.1 acres of open space. So this is section 1, record plat here on your left, and then on your right is just a view of how it was laid out on that original 158 acres. So section 1 was 58 lots with 4.6 acres of open space. The proposed plan is to increase to 170 lots and 15 acres of open space. So this is the proposed 2017 plan for section 2 of Summit Parks. The area highlighted in blue, that is the future section that is being proposed. Everything else that is here in white, that was the portion that had already been previously platted back in 2008. The applicant was required to perform a traffic analysis to determine the impact on the road and surrounding area with the increase of 36 lots in the development by KYTC and Oldham County Traffic Engineer, because the last traffic survey was performed in 2006. Section 7.2C4 of the Oldham County Subdivision Regulation states that changes to a project during development that will result in an increase of traffic or its distribution over 20% or 100 peak hour trips, whichever is less, on existing or proposed roadways will require an updated traffic study. The increase in traffic from the previous plan of 192 lots to the proposed plan, which was 228, was 18.8%, therefore not requiring an updated traffic impact study. The preliminary plan must also comply with all established state and county ordinances and requirements at the time of approval, and the applicant is not requesting any variances or waivers with this section. This was the 2006 binding elements. There were 19 of those that were listed excuse me, at the time of approval back in 2006. I've tried to identify these as best as I could. Items 1, 2, and 3, those talk about a comprehensive sediment and erosion control plan, and the Oldham County Fire Hydrant Ordinance. Those would be updated with binding element number 5 that says the preliminary plan must comply with all established state and county ordinances and requirements at the time of approval. Number 4 from the previous binding element states that no lot may be further subdivided in a greater number of lots than approved by the Planning Commission. This is standard language that we add to all subdivision plans. That will remain, and that is covered under 2017 binding element number 2. The state's basically the same thing. Number 5 says the cumulative phasing plan shall limit the number of building permits issued per year as follows. That is the phasing plan that was approved for the development in 2006. The updated language for 2017, binding element number 3, says the cumulative phasing plan shall limit the number of building permits issued to 40 per year, beginning with the first record plat. Items 6 and 7 from the 2006 binding elements is in reference to satisfy any water flow and pressure requirements of LaGrange Fire and Rescue. The applicant must provide any necessary upgrades to the water line system for this site prior to record plat. And item 7 says the applicant shall participate in the main extension from Zale Smith Road, as well as install the water main inside the development and loop the line to Jericho Road as directed in the LaGrange Utility Commission Agency Review Letter. I have confirmed with LaGrange Fire and with LaGrange Utilities that all of the water line upgrades and extensions have been completed. Item number 8 says there shall be no direct access to Jericho Road from lot 69 through 71, lot 89, lot 1, and lots 4 through 13. 2017 binding element number 4 addresses those same lots. Item 9 says all open space and pedestrian paths shall be dedicated as permanent open space. The pedestrian paths were not constructed in section 1 and are not proposed on the revised plan, and the applicant can explain why they were not constructed in section 1 and why they are not being proposed in this revised plan as well. Number 10 says all easements requested by any utility or other service agency shall be provided and labeled on the record plat. That is standard practice for staff to have agency review and to ensure all of those are done at the time record plats are approved, so that language is not necessary. Items 11, 12, 13, and 14 are regarding the entrance. It says all the lighting at the entrance shall be full cutoff lighting, low level lighting approved by staff. A right turn lane will be constructed at the main entrance at the time the entrance is constructed. Staff shall approve the planning plan for the berm along Jericho Road, and the berm shall be constructed along Jericho Road as presented at the public hearing and shown on exhibits 1 and 2. Items 11 through 14 all have been installed or are in compliance. Home number 15, homes shall be built with substantial similar home elevations as those presented at the hearing, including 85% brick facades. This is another one that's kind of like what we had at the reserves of Deerfield. This has not been enforced by the permitting department as they were not aware of this binding element. The current developer has the requirement listed in the deed restrictions, but also has included cement siding as another type of product that could be used. So these are being addressed in the deed restrictions, and that is where staff feel they should be addressed and not at planning level for design. Number 16 says water line improvements shall be constructed prior to construction of the subdivision. I have confirmed with LaGrange Utilities that all the water line upgrades and extensions have been completed. Number 17 says the deed restrictions shall restrict the use of motorized vehicles on the pedestrian trail system, excluding wheelchairs. The pedestrian paths were not constructed in section 1 and not proposed on the revised plan, so that language is not needed because there are no trails. A 20-foot access easement shall be provided to silt basin number 3 for access and maintenance on the open space. The revised plan outlines a 15-foot easement, which is adequate for access. And then number 19, the county engineer shall review the blue line streams and approve any mitigation required by either the county or the Corps of Engineers. I had confirmed with the county engineer about removing this binding element, but we have had subsequent discussions on this, and I think he's going to address this issue when he is up to talk about this plan. So these are the revised binding elements for Summit Park Section 2, which I will not reiterate these again, but these were the 5 that were listed on the previous slide. So these are the ones that staff are recommending. This is the second entrance into, if you're coming from LaGrange, it's the first entrance, but it's considered that it's called the second entrance on the plan. So it's the first minor entrance, which there's a green star there, which is kind of hard to see, but that is looking into the undeveloped section there of section 2. This is the adjoiner to the west. So this line here is the property line. This is a garage, which is the same garage, and then there was actually a home that was here that had, I'm assuming, had burned. There's just a foundation that's left there now. But this is the adjoining property owners to the west. This is the west view from the second entrance. This is looking back towards LaGrange off of Jericho Road. This is the east view going towards Henry County, and you'll see highlighted there is the main entrance into the subdivision. This is the berm and the plantings. This is the adjoining property across the road, so the development is on this side here. We'll call that the north, I guess you could say. This is the berm driving east. Again, you'll see the red arrow. That is the signature entrance into the development. And you can partially see there's another picture, but there's the turning lane that was installed as well. This is the berm driving west So this is coming from Henry County going into LaGrange. This is the berm with the plantings. This is the view from Massey School Road looking into the development. This house and this house are part of Summit Parks. So this is the view from Massey. This is the signature entrance and the landscaping and lighting. This is to show that the turning lane was installed and is in use. These are the current homes that are in Summit Parks that have been constructed. This is if you're coming in the development or if you're looking at the picture, it's this area here. It's kind of hard to see. There's a green arrow here. That is looking into the future section of Section 2. So it's looking into this part here. This is looking along the backside. And the name of the subdivision just slipped me. Woodridge Estates. Thank you. So this is looking, and these are the homes that you can see along through there, through the backside. This is the right side looking into this area here. We'll call it the right side for future Section 2. This is a comparison of what was originally approved, what went to record, and what's being proposed today. So, Jericho Point, what this shows that the number of lots was 192. How many total acres and lots, right away, open space, acres and open space, and what the minimum lot area was shown on there. So then this is what went to record for Summit Parks, and then so this gives you what the balance was left from the original development. So if you look here, this is the difference. So they're asking for an increase of 36 lots. Obviously, there's no increase or decrease in total acreage. The acres and lots went down 3.6 acres. The acres in right-of-way decreased by 1, and the areas in open space increased by 5.9. Because this section they're showing 15 acres and the balance was 9.1, so they're actually increasing 5.9 acres in open space. And the minimum lot area, previous development was 18,992, and the minimum lot area in this development is 12,500. So again, this is the 2017 revised plan for Section 2. So the applicant is requesting approval of a revised preliminary subdivision plan for Summit Park Section 2. And that is all that I have.
Alrighty, Ms. Albee, thank you very much. And Mr. Harris, were you sworn in? Okay. Scott Harris, our county engineer, if you want to come forward and provide us with some additional information.
Good morning. I just had 3 items to add from the engineers department to go along with what was turned in at the TRC, which was basically covered by Amy's revised list that said all ordinances will be followed. The entire storm sewer system shall be enclosed by a 15-foot storm sewer easement. That's ordinance. What's not in the ordinance is that also allows access to that said easement. We have easements that we can't get to. They're landlocked by private property. So we want access to the easements that are defined. Number 3 on the board, existing stormwater retention basins are not allowed to be taken out of service for a new development. If any of them are planned to be used in this construction, silt basins separate from these systems will be required to be designed into the construction phasing. They shall only be removed after stabilization has taken place and removal is approved in writing by the county engineer. there was a significant number of stormwater basins put in the original phase. And there's a significant number more proposed to go in. And I have had several discussions with the applicant's engineer, and I believe there won't be an issue. They seem to have all their bases covered. But as a standard, we do not allow the removal of a functioning basin from a storm sewer system to build something else. So you need to maintain that basin, so you need to put up what we call a silt trap, keep it from filling in. And the last one, this is one that Amy and I had a discussion on, and she was correct at her statement that we had discussed this. But this is slightly different. The county engineer shall review the blue line streams and approve any mitigation required by either the county or the Corps of Engineers. The Corps of Engineers no longer does their own hydraulic calculations. They put that on the local entity, me. So that's by state ordinance, so that's not something we need to add. But what they often do is require mitigation for a permit in the form of adding additional wetlands or planting trees or whatever. We want to say in where that mitigation happens and how that mitigation happens. We don't mandate it, but it is our county and our citizens that they get to deal with whatever mitigation that is. And I don't know that there's any. But this is a kind of a catch-all. So,
Okay.
any questions?
We'll open it up here in just a second. I wanted to get Michael Williams up there. Good? So- Right. Michael Williams, Oldham County School System. He is here to talk about school capacity. And I think we need to get you sworn in, correct? Okay. That's all right. Ms. Fox?
Yes, the truancy officer was late. Go figure.
Do you solemnly swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
His name and address for the record, please.
Michael Williams, Oldham County Board of Education, 6165 West Highway 146, Crestwood, Kentucky. As you can see, when we talked about last month, we've put this on the new form. Looking at it, the schools would be Oldham County Middle School, Oldham County High School, and Locust Grove Elementary School. Locust Grove and Oldham County High School at this point are above capacity, but not in a way that would affect this development. So in box or section 6, you see adequate capacity. It is an inadequate capacity, but the numbers are within the mitigated phasing range that we have agreed to. We'll be more than happy to answer any questions that you all have at an appropriate time.
Okay. Thank you, sir.
You're
And
quite welcome.
let me open it up for questions now. And if I could, if you, Michael? We'll get you to stay up, because what I had thought we'd do, we would open it up for questions, and if they had any questions for the capacity, and then if they don't, or if they, after you answer those, then you could probably just leave and won't have to stick around for the whole.
My secretary would love you for that. She said
All
I
right.
have lots to do today.
I understand. Commissioners, any questions for Michael, if we could, Williams? Mr. McWilliams?
Good morning.
How are you, sir?
Just fine, and you?
Good.
Would you explain to the commission how the school board determines a capacity number for a particular facility?
It is actually set for us by the state. The state has certain regulations that determine how many students can fit in said classrooms. And then they evaluate each classroom in the building and determine a total number for that building.
Okay, and what happens from a state perspective in the event that a facility is determined to be over capacity?
We are encouraged to mitigate that in some shape, manner, or form, that being utilizing additional space in the building, having the site-based council vote to increase the capacity in each classroom. Not so much, and I'm not saying the capacity, but the number of students that a teacher can have in each classroom, which then allows that in the short term for us to be over capacity as we look for other alternatives, i.e. redistricting, building another school.
Is there a number or a percentage over capacity at which the state says it's time to expand the number of classrooms, it's time to make the media center larger, it's time to increase the size of the cafeteria? it's time to build another gymnasium?
There are, but to my knowledge, Mr. McWilliams, we have never reached that point in Oldham County. Well, let me back that up. Back in the years when we were growing by 500 students a year, yes, they were coming in saying, you've got to build more, you've got to build more, and we didn't have the money to build more. But right now, when you take the entire district, we're still sitting low enough in capacity district-wide that they're not going to say that to us, because they're also saying to us, for us to be ready to build the next elementary school, every elementary school has to be at a minimum of 85% of capacity, and we're not there yet.
And I think that's one of the things that people don't understand. There's more to it than just a school with too many kids. It's the district number of elementary schools.
Correct.
Or middle level schools, or high schools, or whatever.
Right,
So
the state looks at it that way, and the state looks at it, we get at the middle school and the high school, we actually get an adjustment because of how students change classes, where in elementary school they don't as consistently.
Thank you, sir.
You're quite welcome.
All right, any additional questions for Mr. Williams, McWilliams? Mr. Williams. I'm sorry. Any additional questions? Mr. Baxter, do you have any questions for for Mr. Williams?
I do.
Okay, let me get you up here and get name and address, so we'll be official.
I'm Barry Baxter. I'm the attorney for the developer, 117 West Main Street here in LaGrange. First of all, Mr. Williams, this form is filed in the record, is it not?
Yes.
So you-
It was given to Ms. Fox, gave to Ms. Alvey when it was approved at our November board meeting.
Okay. And just so that I understand, box number 6, where it says adequate capacity, you've checked the middle ground.
Correct. It is inadequate because we are over capacity, but it is within the agreed range that we will accept the 40 permits per year.
Okay. So basically, from a layman's perspective, we're okay.
Yes.
That's all I need to know.
Okay.
Thank you, sir.
Any
You're quite
additional
welcome.
questions from the commissioners? Okay, well, and this is a little bit out of order, but let me ask if there's anyone here that would like to ask him in particular any questions before we dismiss him. Okay, seeing none. Merry Christmas, sir, and
Thank you,
thank you
sir.
for being here. All right, with that, commissioners, now we'll open it up for any questions for either Ms. Alvey or Mr. Harris. Any questions? Mr. McWilliams.
Amy, please. When we get to that point in the hearing where we are talking about binding elements,
Yes, sir.
if there is a motion to approve to include binding elements, that would be the previous binding elements as well as the additional 5. Is that correct?
No.
Or are we dealing with what? What would we specifically are we being asked to approve on binding elements?
The 5 that are here are the proposed binding elements for Summit Park Section 2, plus the 3 that Mr. Harris added,
Okay,
would be those.
just clarifying in my muddled mind.
Yes, sir.
It was too confusing to add section 1s in there because of the ones that were already accomplished. There's no need to put things that are already done.
Thought that, but the 11th commandment, thou shalt not assume.
All right, any additional questions for staff? Yes, sir, Mr. Douglas.
Hi. Ms. Alvey, I wasn't clear in the paperwork. Originally on the TRC, I guess the state or somebody had asked for a second turn lane at the second entrance, but I think the engineer said it's not needed. I mean, I noticed that in the TRC.
No, I don't know anything about the discussion of a second turn lane.
It was under CW Seymour. It says second entrance needs to be updated, endorsed, updated traffic impact study. Then it said Visan responded, turn lane has already been installed. So what does that mean?
The turn lane has already been
So we're just having one turn lane
Correct.
into the main entrance, nothing at the second entrance?
correct. And that they're saying that the original 2006 traffic study did not warrant a turn lane. But the developer at the time installed a turn lane for safety. but it was not required or warranted from the 2006 study. But the developer at that time did install that turn lane, and I have
I saw that, and
The picture
I
is-
just was confused about,
Yeah.
was there respect?
No.
And then my last comment was, to you, was the comment that was made by Chief Smith,
Mm-hmm.
and I don't see any update and I'll ask, he had concerns about traffic and service concerns. What did he mean by service concerns?
Well, anytime that there is more new homes in Oldham County, that obviously increases their demand on service. So obviously with new homes, new citizens, which would be new patrolling areas, more prone for accidents or speeding or anything of that nature. It's just anytime that there's more development in Oldham County that put more people in the county with more homes, it obviously creates more of a demand on their department with no increase in officers.
This is in the city limits of LaGrange, and City of LaGrange will cover the subdivision itself.
That was gonna be my next question. Is it this land, or this area been incorporated into the
Yes.
city already?
It is. It is in the city limits of LaGrange, yes.
Thank you.
All right, any additional questions for staff? Yes, sir. Mr. Falvey?
Ms. Alvey,
Yes, sir.
and I may have missed when you put the plan up, but can you put the plan that shows these 170 lots but where the open space was? That's what I didn't see.
I don't have it highlighted in a separate color on here, but the section 2, everything that is highlighted here in section 2, those are all of the lots.
That might be a question that you could ask the applicant. They could probably outline that a little
I
bit
can
better.
pull the plan. I did not color code the open space areas on the revised plan for section 2.
And then, okay, and I've got one other question. I think when you were outlining everything, point 9 of the previous binding elements, you said they have not put in the paths yet? Is that what you told me? Or
Correct.
told us?
And that is a question the applicant can explain. The original plan had pedestrian paths throughout the development that were going to be for walking and everything else, but they can explain, A, that development went under, and B, there was some other mitigating things related to the project from the EPA standards.
But those improvements are still planned?
No, they are not. There are not walking paths planned in this. In the existing section 1, they were never constructed.
Okay.
And so they're not proposing that in section 2 because they were never constructed in section 1 as well.
Okay.
But the applicant explained why they're not doing that.
All right.
Okay, any additional questions for staff before we move on? Yes, sir, Mr. Douglas.
Mine's for Mr. Harris.
Okay,
How many blue line streams are in the neighborhood?
I believe there are 3 that are being impacted.
Has EPA already and DOW already given permits for those that you are aware of?
I have not seen any.
Were there permits issued in the previous,
Yes.
and they've expired?
That's a very long answer, and I wasn't here for it. But as I understand it, when the original development went belly up, when you get a permit, it doesn't go with the owner. It doesn't go with the company. It goes with the land. So when the applicants bought this property, they made the upgrades that came with it as designated by the EPA,
So those are already been done?
as I understand it.
Were there previous NOVs, notice of violations, or?
Not
notice
issued
of-
by us,
Not by EPA either?
not that I'm aware of.
And
Not that are in within our filing system.
based on preliminary, because I know that they don't give the stormwater quality management plan until start of construction. Based on what you've talked to their engineer about, do you see any issues with drainage going into any of those stormwater,
No,
into the blue line streams?
no, that's where they have to go That's what drains the property.
Exactly.
When you have a big enough piece of property that the drainage way gets large, it becomes a blue line stream. That's all that really is. So their preliminary plan shows their proposed basins to be outside of the stream and then draining into them, which is the proper way. So no, they appear to have it very much under control.
Great, thanks.
All right. Any additional questions before we move on? All right. Seeing none, Mr. Baxter, I'll call on you again to make the presentation for the applicant.
Good morning. I'll try to be brief because I think Amy has covered most of what we need to talk about this morning. Mr. Douglas, I will tell you that in response to your question, I believe there were NOVs issued by the Corps, and the only reason I know that is because I represented the prior developer, and I sat in the basement of the federal building with about 15 people from the Corps of Engineers who were explaining to my developer client that it was a $25,000 a day fine for his stream encroachments that he had done without permits. So that was a problem. There's no question about it. And that is a problem actually that came with this piece of property. The property, as indicated, was approved, the original plan in 2006. I didn't realize that it took quite that long for the developer to get into financial trouble. It seemed to me like fairly quickly we were having issues that he was having to deal with. Ultimately, that property was foreclosed upon by PBI Bank. PBI Bank ended up purchasing the property back at the foreclosure sale and ultimately sold it to my client that is here today, okay? When the property was sold, which I think was 2 years ago, did we close? 1 year ago? I'm not entirely sure. I think it was 2 years ago. When the property was sold, there were some immediate concerns that had to be addressed, and we will talk in more detail about that with the EPA. There has been mitigation that was performed on the property at the request and requirement of the EPA in order to be able to move forward with the remaining lots in Section 1. Including the planting of a number of trees and things in order to deal with some issues that were created by the prior developer and the construction crews that were on the property at the time. Those issues have been rectified, and we can talk in more detail about that. Mr. Vincent is going to get up here. He can respond to your question about the open spaces. I think Mr. Falvey probably more than I can. He's going to talk about the plan that he has put together. We did review this, and Mr. McWilliams, you will remember there was a slide that had the 19 prior binding elements, and there was an explanation that a number of those binding elements have been incorporated to what is in existence here or otherwise complied with. The issues with the pedestrian path, it was never constructed in Section 1. And so when my client took over, it wasn't even there. So there's no way to connect that. Further, those pedestrian paths would have impacted these blue line streams and would have caused problems that the EPA and the Army Corps of Engineers were not going to let those paths, as they're impacting stream crossings or they're within the areas of the buffers of the streams, they weren't allowed to be constructed either. So that's part of the reason that those items were taken out. The other being that there's no connection to those. As you can see in the plan, Section 2 really is 2 sections. So in order to connect those to the walking paths that don't exist, there's no way for that to happen either, okay? I'm going to let Mr. Vincent get up and talk about his plan and explain the issue about the open space and some other things. So, Bob, if you don't
Mr.
mind.
Baxter, could get everybody sworn in that's going to talk
Yeah,
or going to
sure.
testify?
Walt, if you don't mind, if you'd be sworn as well, just in case they have questions for you.
Okay. Ms. Fox, if you would swear them in, please.
Do you solemnly swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Sir. And Sands, we'll just need your name and address, please.
My name is Bob Vincent. I'm the owner, president of Vincent Engineering Land Surveying, 306 West Jefferson, here in LaGrange. I'm not going to go over all the numbers that Amy's already presented, but originally this was a 192 lot development that was constructed in 2007. The developer did go bankrupt, and only a few of the lots were actually sold. The major issue, however, was the construction that included the filling of the natural streams and the installation of piping without proper permits. Going back to what Scott said, to the best of my knowledge from the research that I have done, the county engineer did approve the construction plans, but I'm not aware of any permits from the DOW, Corps of Engineers, anybody that were actually obtained. And obviously that created problems. I think there was, from the construction, there was a significant amount of runoff and siltation that left the site. And of course that started the whole process of the investigation. The issues were passed from the county to the State Division of Water, then to the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, and ultimately it ended up with the federal EPA. So this left the development in limbo for several years, many years, I guess maybe almost 10. So prior to Jericho Partners actually purchasing this property, we did a diligent search to try to obtain information. Who do we talk to? What do we got to do in order to satisfy the federal government's concerns, EPA, and to allow the development to move forward? It took 2 years. And finally, I got a hold of a gentleman with the US EPA. His name is Mr. Joel Strange. Real nice fellow, and got to know him real well. But there's only 4 inspectors throughout the United States that were qualified or able to move this project forward and give us the approvals that we needed. So a lot of people didn't realize it, but this development was a real blight, and it was a tremendous issue, and nobody wanted to do anything. The bank didn't want to do anything with it. No one was really pushing the bank, as far as we know, to do anything with it. So if somebody didn't come in and take it over, it would just continue to erode as it was eroding and degrade, and they couldn't sell the lots because of all the sanctions that were against it. So anyhow, we decided, or the developers decided that we would pursue it and see what we could do. As I said, we developed a relationship with Mr. Strange, and we created a plan, a very detailed plan, and I'll give you some of the highlights of what that is. We removed over 1,000 feet of piping in these natural streams that were unpermitted. Again, there were no permits, and anytime you put a pipe in a natural stream, that's a blue line stream, you have to get at least permit from the Division of Water, and a lot of times you have to get that from the Army Corps of Engineers. So that did not occur. So at any rate, we removed all of that piping. We restored at least 350 feet of other channels that had eroded, that were outside of the piping area. This was due to the construction. There was a lot of overlot grading that went along with the roads and the piping that was constructed. It wasn't properly revegetated, so there were channels in various places just all over the property that needed to be addressed, and we did that. We also agreed to create a conservation easement along the restored streams that we took care of. There was payment of mitigation for the existing pipe that was installed underneath the existing roadway in Section 1. I don't feel like I'm at liberty to tell you how much that was, but it was a lot of money. Let's just put it that way. There was additional restoration that included overlap grading and revegetation, again, due to the stripping of the property that occurred in Section 1. And there were enormous areas that had bare ground and were left over from the construction. Our proposed plan has eliminated 4 of the major creek crossings that were approved by the Planning Commission from the original 2006 plan. That was very much in favor of by the EPA. Obviously, they want us to eliminate all the creek crossings that we possibly could. Moving forward, as Amy said, the existing zoning is R2 and conservation, and we've designed the lots to meet the requirements of these zoning requirements, of these zoning districts, with no variances and no waivers requested. We're requesting the approval of 170 lots, bringing the total to 228 lots. Our proposed development will give us an average lot frontage of 110 feet. Under R2 zoning, these lots could be 80 feet in width. Our net density is 26,500 square feet, and that's more than twice than the allowable lot size of 12,500 square feet. There are 9.1 acres in the balance of the open space from the original plan, and we have 13.6 in our proposed plan for an increase of 4.7. And I apologize to Amy, I have 15 on the revised development plan, but it should have been 13.6. There was one open space that was included in section 1 of 1.4 acres, and I counted it twice. So that's how that happened. Wanted to give you an example of what the property looks like now. This is an area here of the streams that we have restored. This particular area had a 48-inch pipe in it, and it was basically graded flat across. We removed that pipe, we restored it, we planted trees as a part of that mitigation. Also, a lot of these areas, going back to the pedestrian paths, in order to build those pedestrian paths, there were a lot of creeks that had to be crossed. So that's why they put in the pipe. And I guess at some point the developer went belly up and went bankrupt, and they didn't have the money to actually build those pedestrian paths. Those paths were planned to be paved. They were going to be asphalt, but it didn't happen. and the only thing that we can assume is that they ran out of money. So, moving forward, obviously that plan doesn't fit. You don't have the pipes and the crossings in place in order to construct those paths. So we didn't really see an easy or a logistical way of including those paths in either building them in the previous section 1 or moving forward. Here is another example. That was a 36-inch pipe that had been removed, and you can see the ditch area that's been restored. Following up on that also, our agreement with Mr. Strange is he has actually come back twice during the restoration process and approved what we've done. We have successfully met his requirements, and we have I guess it's an agreed order that he signed off on. We do have a permit from the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers for the work that has been done. So everything is approved from a permitting standpoint, and our letter from the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, based on our mitigation, states that we're free to move forward to complete the project. I want to show you this real quick. This is just a thumbnail sketch of a portion of the record plat that was approved in 2006. And even though their lot sizes were a little bit larger, their base lot was 100 foot in width, and ours is basically 80 foot in width. They really created what I would call a cookie cutter arrangement, where the lots are all tiered, they all back up to each other, everything is basically symmetrical. This is something that you would typically see in an R2 development, but it would be more suited if the property were basically flat. And we have a lot of topographic features out here. We have a lot of natural streams, and this kind of a lot layout just really doesn't fit the ground. So that's how we approached it. Again, we wanted to eliminate as many crossings as we could. We wanted to build the roads on the ridges to the best of our ability, and we wanted a layout that would be a little more pleasing for the ultimate user. So this is what we've ended up with. One of the things I want to point out is that even though we're asking for additional lots, this particular layout does several things. All of the lots will back up to either the perimeter of the property, they will back up to open space, or they will back up to a natural feature such as a stream. So what does that mean? Well, that gets us away from that cookie cutter orientation. When you look out the back door, your back door, you're not necessarily going to be looking into the back door of the neighbor that's behind you. There's a little bit more area of dense area up here in the northeast corner. Again, the concept of not backing up to your neighbor as much holds place, because what we have is we've got smaller lots, but most of them, or really all of them, are backing up to larger lots. So you don't have two small lots back to back. To address your question on the open space, let me see if I can draw in here. There are basically two large open space areas that we're proposing for Section 2. I don't have a picture that shades them, but I'm going to try to outline them for you real quick. The first one is all of that area there. That contains, I believe it says 6.8 acres. Yeah, that's fine. That's fine. The second area of open space roughly is this area here, and that area, I can't really read it, but I think it's a little over 7 acres. So the total, okay, so the total is the 13.6 acres. The new section will be served by the existing utilities, including the 12-inch water line that was recently installed by the developer and the city of LaGrange. As you saw earlier, that was one of the binding elements that was supposed to happen before the record plat was recorded, but it didn't. So don't have any explanation for that. I have met with Mr. Harris concerning our stormwater and water quality conceptual plan. We will meet all the requirements of the new post-construction ordinance, and we'll actually provide super detention for the project. And what I mean by super detention is that there are two primary outfalls, two basins, one here and one here. And in both of those discharges, the rate of discharge after the development is ultimately constructed will be less than what it was before. The volume will be more, obviously, but the rate of the discharge will be less. And that's really all I had.
Okay. Thank you, sir.
Bob, if you don't mind, could you just take a minute to explain about the new entrance and the old entrance? And my understanding is that when this was purchased, there was not a final top coat on the roads in the existing section, which has now been done, correct?
That's correct, yes.
Okay, and then the new entrance is going to be located down in this area?
That's correct.
Okay, so that was required on the original plan, and we're just going to use that, what was proposed on the original plan, correct?
That is correct. We actually have a permit in our name from the Highway Department, CWC Moore. So yeah, that is the plan moving forward. There's one other thing I did want to mention. Can we go back to this plan? I'm sorry, I forgot, but Amy brought this up. At the northeast corner of the property, there is a 60-foot, it's not an easement, it is actually owned by the developer. We don't have any intention of using that right now. It goes all the way out to Massey School Road. The original developer, I think he owned this corner down here, and he kept that 60-foot in case they needed it for an additional entrance at some point, and then he ended up selling it to the current property owners, is my understanding. So I just wanted to mention that real quick.
So the plan as proposed obviously there would be no reason to use that.
That's correct, yeah.
Right? So there'll be a lot in here that backs up to the easement, and there's not gonna be any access to Massey School Road.
That's correct.
So we're just gonna use the two entrances that are proposed on this plan and that were proposed on the previous
The
plan.
original plan, that's
Okay.
right.
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you, sir.
Kind of to clear up a little bit about that issue with the core, okay? There was I don't know what this means exactly, why they call it a consent decree. I guess because you have to consent to, they tell you you're gonna consent to it, so you consent to it, I guess, that was entered into with the EPA that said exactly what had to be done by way of restoration work. That work has been completed, and the EPA has signed off as that being completed and approved, okay? There was also a mitigation fee that had to be paid to the Army Corps for any of the Blue Lime Stream crossings that actually the prior developer should have had to pay, but because he went bankrupt, he did not pay that. And in order to have any stream crossings, that was something that the current developer, in order to resolve that issue with the EPA, paid the mitigation fee. So that has also been paid, and all of that work has been approved as complete, okay? We believe that the plan as submitted is a good plan, and that while it is a revision of an existing development plan, it is actually a better plan for this property, as explained by Mr. Van Sand, in that it follows the contours of the land, and we've eliminated all those stream crossings, the other items that were in there. Obviously, no variances, no waivers, so it's not like we're asking for something to be outside of the regulations to be approved. We think that the plan as proposed meets several goals and objectives of the comprehensive plan, including goal LU-1, goal CF-4, goal objective C4-41, and we're just trying to get something approved here that is actually going to clean up something that, quite frankly, has been a problem since the prior developer, Mr. Chapman, went bankrupt in I thought it was earlier than this, but I think it was 2009, 2010. It took over a year for PBI to push the foreclosure through, and then when PBI got the property back, they just didn't do anything with it. They just let it sit there, and there was 2 or 3 existing houses that were built in the development, and it was kind of like the road to nowhere, you know, that bridge in Alaska that doesn't go anywhere. Nothing was happening, nothing was moving. This is a positive sign in an effort to move forward and to get this property, which was already zoned, get it developed and get it built out. So if you all have any questions for us at the appropriate time, we'll be glad to answer. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Wait, your application, sir?
Yes, sir.
Mr. Chisholm, he's the Director of the Drainage Utilities Commission. Is there anything that you'd like to add or address? I know you get several things done, but there's time, sir. Okay? Yes, sir. All right, with that, let me ask, is there anyone here that'd like to speak in support of this application? Okay, seeing none, we'll now open it up for testimony and questions by those opposing the application. Is there anyone here that either has questions or would like to testify in opposition to this application? We'll get everybody who wants to testify or have questions to stand up when we get sworn in, and then we'll get your name and address up there. So, Fox, if you would, just one person wants to testify. Okay, let's get you sworn in.
Do you solemnly swear to tell the truth and nothing but the truth?
I do.
And then just your name and address for the record, please.
My name is Craig Mount. I live at 3010 Jericho Road, LaGrange. And I own the property between the proposed development and Massey School Road, a portion of the property that fronts on Massey School Road. I'd like to just take a few minutes to kind of review some of the points that Ms. Alvey went over of some of the differences between the previously approved development plan and the current proposed development or subdivision plan. The first question I have is the previous plan that I looked at of the proposed development showed the minimum lot size of feet by 150 feet. Is that still the proposed minimum lot size?
We need to get you to come back up, whoever wants to answer that.
Yes, sir, the minimum size would be 80 by 150.
Well, unless my calculator is lying to me, that is 12,000 square feet, not 12,500 square feet, as previously stated.
You are correct, 80 by 150 would be 12,000.
Okay. All right.
Okay?
Simply wanted to point that out. The original, as Ms. Alvey pointed out in her presentation, the original minimum lot size was just under 19,000 square feet. The proposed minimum lot size is now 12,000 square feet, which is the absolute minimum for R2 zoning. The 170 proposed lots, 29% of those lots will be this minimum 12,000 square feet. The original right-of-ways in the approved development plan were 60 foot wide. The proposed right-of-ways are 50 feet wide. Again, the minimum for a local roadway. The original building setback limits were 50 feet. The proposed building setback limits are 35 feet. Again, the minimum for R2 zoning. In August of this year, the developer amended the deed of restrictions for the entire subdivision and reduced the minimum required square footage for each classification of home. In addition, the developer added cementatious board, better known as hardy board, as an approved exterior wall siding, thus reducing the cost of home construction. These points all are evidence that the developer is only concerned about two things: minimizing the cost of construction and maximizing profits, with little regard for the neighborhood and the property values of the existing homeowners of Summit Park. There are two other issues that were originally being addressed by the original subdivision, approved subdivision plan.
Amy,
I'd like to.
could you switch that over?
Both of these issues were drainage issues. Get the top one. The first one is highlighted in yellow here that was shown on the original preliminary development plan. And it is caused by a natural depression in the topography, approximately 600 feet south of, on Massey School Road, approximately 600 feet south of Jericho Road. This area frequently floods during heavy storms and closes Massey School Road due to flooding. The previous subdivision plan called for extending a storm sewer pipe to this area to provide positive drainage outlet for the area. The second issue is the culvert pipe under Massey School Road at the intersection with Jericho Road. This pipe is clogged and buried and causes ponding in the roadside ditch. Previously, the subdivision plan called for the pipe to be removed and replaced. I am happy to learn that the current developer owns that 60-foot strip between the subdivision and Massey School Road. One of the gentleman agreements I had with the previous developer was that once the development was complete, that I would have the opportunity to purchase that 60-foot strip and add it to my property there at the corner of Massey School Road and Jericho Road. I'd like to also extend that offer to the current developer for that. If the Planning Commission chooses to approve the subdivision plan, I hope that solutions to the two drainage problems could be added to and incorporated into the plan or binding elements. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. All right, is there anyone else that would like to testify or have questions in opposition to the applicants? Okay, seeing none, commissioners will now open it up for questioning of either the applicant or the gentleman that is opposing the application. Is there any questions from the commission? Mr. Finney?
I have a question for the gentleman just with the opposition. You'll need to come back up front, please.
Yes, sir.
On the map you had up there, it showed the subdivision with a yellow line on it.
Yes, sir.
What you are explaining is that more drainage is going to come into this yellow depression area due to the way the drainage is funneled out of the subdivision, which would increase the flooding event on Massey School Road. Was that your point?
No, sir. There's only a very minor part of the drainage that drains to this depression. It comes from the subdivision. It is mostly general localized drainage right along Massey School Road in that area.
Okay, so there is no further impact from the subdivision to that drainage area?
It would be very minimal.
Okay, thank you.
All right, any additional questions? Yes, sir. Mr. McWilliams?
Yes.
What about that other area you were talking about that flooded up the way there? Is that,
At the intersection?
yes, sir?
That is a culvert pipe underneath of Massey School Road.
Okay.
It is currently clogged and buried, such that it ponds water about 95% of the time in the roadside ditch.
Will
Or
the
Jericho Road.
subdivision, assuming it's developed, have any impact on that area?
Again,
By bringing additional water into that?
Again, it will have some minor impact there. If you'll note, right in this area in here, this area will drain off of the subdivision to this lower depression area here, which ultimately goes out that way. The increase of impervious area by construction of homes, driveways, whatever else impervious is constructed on the site, will increase the runoff to that a very small amount.
City of LaGrange responsible for keeping that pipe unplugged?
That pipe is within the state right-of-way of Jericho Road, which is Kentucky 712.
I'm assuming you all have
We have had,
heard your concern.
we've expressed our concern to Mr. Seymour, C.W. Seymour, several times, to no avail.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Mount. Mr. Chairman, thank you.
All right, any additional questions for the applicant or Mr. Mount? All right, seeing none, we'll now move into rebuttal evidence and cross-examination by the applicant. Mr. Baxter.
I was going to point out that those areas that Mr. Mount is concerned about were not issues, but Mr. Mount acknowledged that they're not issues, so I don't really know that I need to say anything about that. I don't think we have anything else to submit, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. All right, Mr. Mount, rebuttal evidence, cross-examination by the opposition. Anything that you want to add? Okay. All right, and now we'll move down to final statement of the opposition. Mr. Mount, anything on a final statement that you would like to make? Okay. He answered no on that. Okay, and then Mr. Baxter, final statement by the applicant.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We are asking that you approve the revised development plan with no variances, no waivers. As indicated by Ms. Alvey in her presentation, we meet all of the regulations that are in effect, not only for the zoning ordinance, but the subdivision regulations and the other county regulations. This is a situation where we are within the guidelines on everything that has been submitted. This is an appropriate use of this property. We don't need obviously a zone change. So from our perspective, this is basically a pretty simple situation of asking you all to follow the rules and follow the regulations and approve our plan as submitted. Thank you all.
Thank you, Mr. Baxter. With that, docket PZ 17031 is now completed. And as always, I'll call on Mr. Urban and Mr. Carter to outline what's being requested on this revised preliminary subdivision plan on 103.4 acres, known as Summit Park Section 2.
Yeah, you're being asked to consider either approval or denial of a revised preliminary subdivision plan. As always, in your packet, you have on page 3 a motion either for approval or denial and why it would or wouldn't comply with the goals and objectives of the comprehensive plan and zoning ordinance or subdivision regulations. There are, if you choose to approve this revision, there are altogether 8 binding elements that would be placed or considered for the remaining sections, not the first section of Summit Parks. The first one is that the approval applies only to the plan presented on December 19th, 2017, Oldham County Planning Commission public hearing. The second is that there shall be no subdivision of any lot into greater number of lots without review by the Oldham County Planning Commission. Third is that the cumulative phasing plan shall limit the number of building permits issued to 40 per year, beginning the first record plat. Number 4 is that there shall be no direct access to Jericho Road from lots 1, lot 59 through 70, lots 225 through 228, and lot 163 is shown on the revised preliminary plan dated November 29th, 2017. The fifth is that the preliminary plan must comply with all established, I'm going to add in here, federal, state, and county ordinances and requirements at the time of approval. And the federal is just in case EPA or Army Corps has anything lingering or requirements that are unnecessary. And then, according to Mr. Harris's review letter, the sixth one would be the entire stormwater system shall be enclosed within a 15-foot stormwater easement that also allows access to that said easement. Number 7 is the existing stormwater detention retention basins are not allowed to be taken out of service for a new development. If any of them are planned to be used in this construction, silt basins separate from these systems will be required to be designed into the construction phasing. They shall only be removed after stabilization has taken place and the removal is approved in writing by the county engineer. And then number 8 is that the county engineer shall review the blue line streams and approve any mitigation required by either the county or the Corps of Engineers.
Okay, is that all, Mr. Urban?
Yes.
Okay, Mr. Carter, anything you need to add? I'm sorry?
So there's a little bit of confusion. I think Amy and I had a conversation about the binding elements, and I guess I want to understand how this is going to work, because one of those binding elements has to do with the construction materials that you all had indicated you don't want to be, the original binding elements that you all don't want to be responsible for as it relates to Section 1 and Section 2?
Correct, and those are going to be in the deed restrictions, as I
Correct,
understand
they
them,
already are.
which we don't regulate.
Okay.
But it's much easier for the developer to have those in deed restrictions as opposed to us trying to figure them out at building permit phase.
So then the other overlap here, I think, has to do with the phasing plan, because there are still, you say 47 lots undeveloped in the first section? There's 47 lots undeveloped in the first section.
That's already to record.
Already to record.
So those permits can be issued.
Okay, I thought we were agreeing as a part of getting the original elements amended or addressed, that we would only pull 40 a year for the whole, for Section 1 and Section 2.
If that's what you want to agree to, that's great, because it helps
This
with
is
the
a
school
conversation Amy and
capacity.
I had, and I just
Sure.
want to make
Well,
sure
I
we're
want
clear
to make
about it.
sure too, are, from what you said, these are only binding elements that are in relation to Section 2. The ones from Section 1 still are in place?
Well,
Because
except for the
that's
ones
what-
that have been accomplished, so, right.
So that, I think that's where the confusion's coming in, because when you started with the motion, or that
I
you
did.
said it was these are for Section 2 only. So that means that the other 19 are still in place for Section 1?
Well, yeah, we had talked about even having a motion that would eliminate those old binding elements
I think that would be clear.
and have it be clear.
That would be our preference, and then obviously my client is willing to forego the 47
Okay,
plus 40, just to do 40 per year.
okay. So let me correct the recommendation that, first, we if you're considering approval of this revised subdivision plan, that you first eliminate or rescind the existing binding elements, because again, some of them have been cleared. And then we add these to all of the development, including the phasing.
Commissioners, y'all understand that, what's
But we
being?
add the new ones
Yeah,
to
these-
all of the development.
Yes, but first you rescind the old ones, because either A, they're no longer applicable, or it's a different developer with different conditions.
Mr. King, you have a question?
Process,
Okay.
are we, that was not a stated objective in the hearing, and I'm wondering if we have a notice issue with that.
Mr. Carter?
I'm not sure about the answer to that. Because you gave notice that this is what was going to be proposed. I mean, you could do it, but I don't know. It's probably, I mean, the notice went out, and when it went out, it did not include rescission of the binding elements on the original plan. So it becomes an issue as to whether or not there's proper notice.
I'm certainly not opposed to that, but for it to hold up well, I've done this badly before, so for this to hold up well, I'd rather not repeat mistakes of the past.
I think you ought to ask Mr. Baxter if he wants to go ahead and with the rescission and see.
Mr. Baxter?
May I propose, Mr. Chairman, that we have this apply only to Section 2, and then I will talk to staff about maybe coming back next month or the month after with proper notice to revise the binding elements and make these applicable to Section 1 as well. I don't want there to be some kind of issue that creates a problem for us. I would prefer to get this approved, and then we can straighten it out with proper notice,
Okay.
if that's fair.
So Commissioners, you understand what he says here, that he will come back, or they will come back either next month or February, I assume?
Yes, sir.
And address Section 1 issues, so that their proper notice will be given, and we will not deal with the rescinding those 19 binding elements today. We will do that at a future meeting.
So we're dealing with the 8 today
Yes,
only.
And those only apply to Section 2.
correct.
Okay. Mr. Carter, is that adequate? Is that, I mean, are you comfortable with that?
Well, then what binding
Get you
element,
a little closer to the mic if you would.
what binding elements are going to apply to Section 1 then, or
The existing ones. at this
Until they
point,
rescind them.
Until he comes
Okay.
back, yes. Yeah.
Yes, I'm good with that.
Okay. All right, Commissioners, you've heard everything outlined by our staff and Mr. Baxter, what they were agreed to do, either for our January meeting or, I guess, February meeting, whenever they can get that worked out. Is that correct? Okay. The chair would now entertain a motion on docket PC 17031, which is for a revised preliminary subdivision plan from Jericho Partners on 103.4 acres. So the chair would now entertain a motion on that. Mr. King?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll move for approval of the revised preliminary plan based on compliance with the subdivision regulations and the zoning ordinance based upon testimony presented. I find that based on that testimony, we have compliance with those bodies, and in addition, find that the revised layout, which follows the contours, is preferable. In addition, the fewer number of stream crossings creates less disturbance to the streams and is preferable as well.
Okay. Mr. Carter, is that an adequate motion?
Yes.
I should say, the 8 referenced binding elements would be part and parcel of that motion.
Okay.
Just one quick thing too, I left out lot 89 on number 4, so if you'll include lot 89 in number 4, lots 1, lot 89, lots 59, I left off 89 in there, since this is gonna be subject just to section 2, even though it's in section 1.
Yes, I would like to incorporate that into the motion as well.
Okay.
And that's related to the access, no access to the.
Correct.
Yes.
And before I accept that motion, let me ask Mr. Carter, just to make sure, do we need to have anything in the record for the minutes about them agreeing to come back to address the binding elements in section 1 at a future meeting? Do we need to kind of lock that
Now,
down?
that's up to them. If they wanted, if they decide to do it.
Okay, but that would affect or could affect the school capacity as far as the number of lots that that they could build on in that first year. Because they could, if they don't come back and address it, they could build the 57 plus the 40, or whatever it is in section 1. It's already gone to
They
record.
could continue getting building permits in section 1,
Okay,
47.
okay. So I didn't know whether that needed to be addressed.
You want to make that a condition of approval?
Well, I just, so that we've got a record of it in the minutes.
Sure.
That, that they have agreed to do that.
Yes.
And, so does Mr. King, can he incorporate that into his motion and do it all in one
Yes.
motion?
Yes.
Mr. King, would you want to incorporate some language, or Mr. Baxter, could I ask you to come back up and just, I know you all have said publicly that you would do that, but I would like to get something just for the record.
We agree to do that, Mr. Chairman. We will come back either next month or the month after and ask that these binding elements be substituted for the existing binding elements for section 1 as well, so that sections 1 and 2 will have the same requirements.
And would this have to be a full public hearing?
Notice should be given, yes.
Yeah.
Okay, okay. And you're okay with that?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And you okay with that, Mr. King?
Yes.
Okay, now we have a motion on the floor.
Second.
Have a second, Mr. McWilliams. Now, any discussion on the motion on docket PZ 17031 for the revised preliminary plan? I'm sorry, Ms. Smith.
I have a question.
Okay, sure. Is your mic on?
Yes. In the acreage that was in the motion, 103, is that going to be the correct acreage since you're also including section 1? Does that make any difference?
Well, we're not really doing section 1. It's already put to record.
Okay.
So it's only the remaining lands.
Okay, got it.
And I know it's confusing because the binding elements would change, but that's, again, the revised preliminary plan is for the remaining land.
Okay, any further discussion? This will be a motion to approve the revised preliminary plan. Okay, seeing no hands go up, Ms. Fox, if you would, let's do the vote on docket PZ 17031, the approval of a revised preliminary subdivision plan on 103.4 acres, known as Summit Parks, Section 2.
Mr. Falvey,
Yes.
Ms. Crosby,
Yes.
Ms. Smith,
Yes.
Mr. King,
Yes.
Mr. Mesker,
Yes.
Mr. Neal,
Yes.
Mr. Hampton,
Yes.
Mr. Finney,
Yes.
Mr. Douglas,
Yes.
Mr. McWilliams,
Yes.
Mr. Klingenfuss,
Yes.
All right, the motion to approve the revised preliminary plan on docket PZ 17031 has been approved on a vote of 11-0. And with that, that completes our public hearings for today. Ms. Alvey, would you let us know what, we were going to have some other discussion today and other business, but could you address that to the commission?
Sure. We were going to talk today about a recommendation from the Study Review Committee regarding short-term rental properties. We can still have that discussion, but we cannot take any official action to recommend that to legislative bodies because we are required to have public meeting. Most likely that public meeting will be on January the 13th, but we will send notices out. We will, it will be advertised in the paper, it'll be on our website, and then we will send notices out to all of the elected officials of the Joint Planning Commission for the city commissioners of Pee Wee Valley, LaGrange, and Crestwood, as well as all of our boards about this public meeting. Again, we are required to have a public meeting before it goes to recommendation to the Planning Commission. So at this public meeting, we will discuss the issues that we previously, which was school capacity, subdivision plans, landscape plans, and short-term rentals. So we can have an informal discussion today if anyone has any questions about short-term rental property standards, or we can wait and have that discussion at the public meeting on, hopefully, like I said, January 13th, and then we will officially come back at our January Planning Commission meeting and ask for a formal recommendation to legislative bodies at that time. So it's up to the chairman if we have anyone that has any questions about short-term rentals. I do not mind discussing that. But again, we cannot take any formal action of recommendation to legislative bodies until we have a public meeting.
Let me just suggest as chair that we, postpone that until next month so we don't, get confused and we're all talking on the same page and we know, exactly what we're going to be discussing. So, we can, I think that would be cleaner and to do that. Do we have anything that looks like for January?
We most likely will have a planning commission in January, and at that time we'll also do election of officers as well.
All right. With that, I think that completes our hearings today, and I want to again wish everybody a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. So, all right, we will stand adjourned.
Here we go.